and welcome to Business 101. I'm 9. We're going to be talking about Chapter 9, Production and Operation Management, and the shift from the focus on just production as technology improves to then operations management. They're basically one and the same, except for instead of calling it production, we shifted to call it operations management as organizations grew larger. Now remember that we're only going to be doing a snapshot of all the ideas. So this PowerPoint is designed to kind of wrap all the ideas together. Make sure that you're still reading your textbook and looking at the full PowerPoint slides online. Here I'm just going to be going over about 20 of them. The actual PowerPoint from the publisher is about 60. So make sure to be doing your reading and look at the entire PowerPoint. Manufacturing in the U.S. We actually manufacture quite a lot, but it's on a decline. Why? Because as technology increases, we have less of a need of workers, right? Because the machines are replacing the workers. So what do we manufacture in the U.S.? Did you know that we manufacture a lot of chemicals? We're one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Producers, not companies. We're one of the biggest pharmaceutical producers in the world. Production. Remember we talked about production in Chapter 1. Production is when we create goods and or services using land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and knowledge. Those are the 5 factors of production. What is product management? It's all the activities that managers do to help firms create goods. So in Chapter 7, we talked about the 4 functions of management. So this is directly from Chapter 7, planning, leading, organizing, and controlling. So how does Chapter 9 relate to these 4 functions? Well, notice that Chapter 9 kind of covers a little bit of all of these. We'll talk a little bit about planning, leading, organizing, and controlling as we talk about production and operations management. Now, how do we produce? Well, Andrew Grove, who is the former chairman of Intel, which makes computer processors, he said that production has 3 basic requirements. You need to be timely. You need to think about time and make sure that you are delivering your products to the customers in a timely manner. You need to have an acceptable quality. Notice how that doesn't say the highest quality. It just means acceptable quality for the lowest possible price. You want to keep your costs low. So notice how production, his focus was really on the product itself. Just these 3 basic things, time, quality, and cost. There are a couple different ways that you can process or set up your production line. You can have a continuous process or something called an intermittent process. There's actually a few different ones, hybrids of these 2, but these are basically 2 opposite poles. You can either have production as continuous flow of raw materials, so think about I Love Lucy in the chocolate factory, or some type of conveyor belt line where basically the product from start to finish, it never stops on that conveyor belt. Or you can have an intermittent process. Continuous process is great for if you are creating large amounts of the same product. Intermittent process is also called batch processing, where you're making things in small batches. So think about when you're making cookies, right? You might make, you might be making chocolate chip cookies and sugar cookies. Maybe they have the same dough, so you might run it in batches. You might make a batch of chocolate chip cookies and then ingest it. You're still using the same machinery, your oven, and then once you're done making your batch of cookies, then you make a batch of sugar cookies. So batches. Think about it like cookies. One company that definitely uses batch production is Nike, right? They allow you to customize your shoes, but the basic shoe is still the same, so they're using the same machinery and they're making it in batches. Okay, we're going to make a bunch of these white shoes, then we're going to make a bunch of these black and white and red shoes, making them in batches. Now, when you are producing things, you can manufacture them either using process manufacturing, where you just physically are changing the materials, or assembly process manufacturing. Assembly process manufacturing is where you're putting components together. So assembly would be kind of like Intel putting their processors together. Process manufacturing is when you're physically or chemically changing the materials, so that's kind of like when you're baking a batch of cookies, right? Manufacturing and production, what do they give us? They give us something called form utility. Together they create form utility, which is the value or the currency added to materials while creating goods and services. So you can create form utility through process manufacturing or assembly process manufacturing, right? Going from a tree to wood to paper. And what are the two types of production processes? You can have continuous or batch processing / intermittent processing. So we're still talking about just the product, product management. In order to increase productivity, we have a few different techniques. So these are some vocab that you should really be familiar with. In fact, if you're taking my online course, this is going to help you with critical thinking question number 3, where it gives you a scenario of a business and asks you, hey, what are some ways that you can improve on this business? Well, I'm really looking for you to integrate some of these ideas. So make sure that you pause and you actually read the text that relates to improving productivity. So let's talk about these. There's computer-aided design / manufacturing, which is just where you're using computers, you're incorporating technology. And you can go a step further and you can use CIM, which is programmed computers to control the production process. So basically you have sensors, if you're using CIM, you have sensors that say, hey, we have low amounts of this, or you need to speed up this process. What does that do? It's very expensive, but it decreases errors and is fast. So a lot of car manufacturers use CIM. There's flexible manufacturing, where machines can do multiple tasks. So basically you design one machine and it can do more than just spray paint. Maybe it can spray paint yellow and red, and it can easily change between the two tasks. We have lean manufacturing, where you're using less factors of production as low as possible. So you'll see about lean manufacturing. There's lots of different ways to make your manufacturing leaner. So basically that's just looking at your production process and seeing where can you cut the fat, where can you reduce the amount of factors of production. Remember, we have 5 factors of production. And then there's mass customization. That's where you're tailoring products to meet the needs of a large number of individuals, but you're doing it on a mass scale. So typically when you think of that's kind of counterintuitive, right? Typically when you think about customization, you're thinking you have one person helping you out, customizing the product just to you. But in mass customization, that's kind of where you're kind of like M&Ms, where they allow you to customize your M&Ms and say, hey, I want to write I love you, Bob, on the M&Ms. Well, that's a form of mass customization, because they're still producing a lot of those M&Ms, but then they're allowing you, the customer, to customize those products to your individual needs. So mass customization, you're still capturing your savings by mass producing, and you're also customizing and giving the customer something that they want. The U.S., as technology has increased, has moved from production to the service sector. We talked about the eras of sorry, I just had a brain fart. Okay, so we talked about the different eras. So service era was one of them. Why are we in the service area? Well, because of technology, 85% of the jobs are in the service sector. So as we move away from pure production to other types of industries, we now call it operations management, which is basically the same as production management, but with some extra layers of things. So what is operations management. That's the management of the process where resources are transformed into goods and services. So almost the same as production. But now you're thinking about some other things, not just, timeliness and getting the goods to the customer at a low cost, but now you're thinking about facility location. Where should you be located? Should you have your location in an obscure place away from customers where it's really cheap to produce? Or should you have your facility close by to your customers to where you're producing and then it's really quick to ship to your customers? So where should your company operate? You're talking about facility layout. Facility layout is a physical arrangement. So should you have your equipment all in a line and create an assembly line? And we'll talk about each of these in turn. Or should you, or do you have a large, heavy equipment where you should use some type of other layout? We're going to be talking about inventory management, purchasing, control quality, production scheduling, and follow-up services. So we'll talk about each of these in turn. Right, so let's delve into operations management for the rest of this lecture. Facility layout. Alright, so we have 4 basic types of facility layouts. The first one is one that hopefully everybody is pretty familiar with. That's your assembly line layout. That some people call it the product line layout because the whole focus is on to make a lot of products, a mass amount, right? Using an assembly line from start to finish. This is really good to use with a continuous production system. Remember we talked about continuous and intermittent production? Well, assembly line is usually used with continuous production, right? You are going continuously from one end to the other. The product is moving in an assembly line. The only problem with an assembly line is what happens if somebody at the beginning, like I Love Lucy, they're not packaging as fast as they should be. What happens to things down the assembly line? Well, they get clogged up. So the only problem with the assembly line layout is if you get a clog in one area, it kind of clogs the whole system. Then we have a modular layout. That's where you have teams of workers producing more complex units of a final product. So think of, IKEA. They make different pieces that you then put together at the very end. It allows the company to make a wide variety of similar products in batches. Remember we talked about intermittent/batch processing, so that kind of goes hand in hand with modular layout. Fixed position layout. That's where you're allowing workers to congregate around the actual product. You would use this for if you can't really move the product. So for example, if you're building a house, you're not going to really want to move it. You're going to want to build it in place where it's going to end up. Then you have process layout. This is kind of similar to modular layout where you're using similar equipment and functions are grouped together. You use process layout for custom products. Who uses this? Hospitals, banks, and manufacturing companies. So let's just say you're making a product, you know that all of your products start with storage, then cutting, and then you can either go to stamping or assembly. In this process, you're not relying on just one area, so you have less clogs. And process layout kind of captures a little bit of the assembly line layout and the modular layout, so it kind of gets the best of both worlds. Usually you use process layout with intermittent batch production. We just talked about facility layouts, the 4 facility layouts. Again, there's more than just those 4, but those are the 4 main ones that you'll see. Then there's inventory management. Inventory management, you'll see some hot words like MRP and ERP and JIT. Well, those are acronyms for 3 things. MRP is Materials Requirement Planning. You don't hear this as much anymore because it's been replaced by ERP, which we'll talk about in just a moment. MRP is basically when you're using computers to help you manage your needs, your sales, what materials you're going to need, what materials are available. But what happens? Remember if we have different teams, we have, sales is a separate department from your materials department, then you don't have a whole lot of communication. Maybe your materials department doesn't realize that sales has increased. So then we have come up with something called ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. That's basically where you're integrating all these different departments and making a single database that all the different departments share. So all the different departments know what the other departments are doing, and you're not having a lot of as much duplication. Think about it as if you go to a hospital, right? And you fill out a form, right? And that form then gets uploaded to the ERP system. So once you do your intake at the hospital, you only have to do it one time. You don't have to keep filling out forms at the hospital as you move from maybe the intake to the waiting room to see the doctor. You don't have to fill out 3 different forms. You just fill out a single form, and each of the different departments has access to your information. So those are 2 different ways of managing inventory. Now, kind of a newer term is JIT, just-in-time inventory. So as you have materials and products just sitting there, that's costing you money as a business. Why? Because then you have to have all those supplies in hand. You have to have a warehouse to keep those supplies on hand or those products on hand. So that is costing you money by keeping a lot of excess inventory. So one way to create lean manufacturing is JIT, which is the production process in which a minimum of inventory is kept in parts, supplies, and other needs are delivered just in time to go on the assembly line. So what does that require? That requires you to have a good ERP or MRP system if you're using just-in-time inventory control, because you're having just enough inventory to keep things flowing. Purchasing as an operations management is where you're looking for the resources, your suppliers, and looking for a good price. Quality control. So when we talk about quality control, there are some words that you really should know. Six Sigma and ISO 9000 and ISO 14000. Six Sigma quality is where your focus is to decrease your defects. So let's just say you produce light bulbs and you have one defect for 100 light bulbs. Well, that's 1% defect rate. Now, Six Sigma says, hey, we want to decrease that defect rate to 99.99966%. So that's a really low defect rate. So companies want to say, hey, be able to say, hey, I have Six Sigma quality. Another standard is the ISO standard. So these are just management assurance and environmental assurance, kind of like a gold sticker that a company can get to say to the public and their suppliers and other people that they work with, hey, I am so good at management that I am ISO certified, or I am so good at thinking about the environment and using best practices that I am ISO certified. So to get these certifications, you have to meet certain requirements. And usually these are very sought after by businesses because they show customers, suppliers that they're a good company to be in business with. Production scheduling. So there are 2 main types of production scheduling. Usually they kind of go together. The first one is PERT. This is where you're kind of analyzing your task and you're drawing kind of a network of, hey, this is where we start with the production, and then they can go along these different ways until we get our final product. So you'll notice that in the middle, not in the middle, I'm sorry, these dark arrows show what's called the critical path, and these other ones are kind of just extra things. And then there's a Gantt chart, which is kind of the gold standard for all companies. Just about every production company will use some form of this chart because it shows you your production scheduling. The yellow shows your work to be done, the white shows your work to be completed, and from this chart you can easily visually see that, hey, after the product goes from machine A and machine B, then it goes to machine C and D, and then once that's completed, then I can do the assembly and printing. Hopefully this was helpful, and don't forget to read the chapter.